In today's video, I'll be sharing with you first impressions after having some time playing with a Sentro knitting machine, all coming from the point of view of a proud hand knitter. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Midweek Ramble. My name is Tayler, and I will be your host. I hope all of you have had a lovely holiday, and I'm wishing you all a very happy new year. If you are new to the channel, welcome, and if you are a returning viewer and subscriber, welcome back. I have something kind of fun to share with you guys today, and a little out of left field, if I'm being honest. We're gonna get into my first impressions after having some time to play with the Sentro knitting machine. All right, before I dive in, a few things I want to clarify right away. This knitting machine was lent to me by my good friend and next door neighbor to play with. I have not spent money on this. This is a first impressions after having some time to play with it over the course of the last 4 days, cranking out a few simple things. That's all this is. I will link to the Sentro knitting machine down below in the description box if this video, for whatever reason, inspires you to purchase one for yourself. However, as I said, I have not purchased one with my own money. This was lent to me, and I thank Jessica, who's my good friend, for letting me borrow this because I've had a pretty good time, and I will talk all about that in just a moment. But another thing that I want to mention too, I'm wearing this shirt today, Whatever Speckles Your Yarn. You can find this in the Wool Needles Hands merch shop because I feel like this is the mentality that we need to have when we talk about different kind of realms of the knitting craft, of the knitting world, hobby-wise. And, you know, that whole whatever makes you happy sort of mentality is very, very important to have here because there are going to be opinions in this video. I also want to mention too that the opinions that I'm sharing with you here are based on my experience, which has been very brief, with this machine and with a limited number of items and limited type of item that I have made with this. These are first impressions and my opinions, and I am entitled to them. Please share yours down below in the description box because I would love to know your thoughts on maybe your experience with knitting machines, your thoughts on knitting machines. All of that is completely welcome. However, in the comment section, be kind to others and understand that we all have opinions. Now that that has been gotten out of the way, let's get started with my first impressions on the Sentro 48 needle knitting machine. I'm breaking this down in a couple of different ways. I'm going to be answering a few different questions here. The first of which would be, what do I like about the machine? Second, what I don't like about the machine. Third, who is it for? And finally, final thoughts. Actually, that's not final. I'll give you my final thoughts, and then at the very end, I will let you know if I plan on purchasing one for myself based on my experience. We're going to answer the first question, which is, what do I like about the machine? Here is the Sentro knitting machine. Now, this is not going to be a video on how to use the Sentro knitting machine, nothing like that. If that's something you're interested in, you can let me know in the comments below. This is simply a first impressions of the machine in general. And I'm just going to give you a quick look at it. I'll pop up some video of the machine being used and whatnot, but this is it right here. This is its size. So I'm going to hold it right in front of my face. It is rather large, but that's because it has a 48 needle, I don't know what you would even call that, like a wheel. Here's the crank. It is made entirely of plastic. It's not super heavy. It's nothing like the Addi version from what I hear. The Addi one is a little bit more heavy, but they're both made of plastic. This one is made of plastic. It doesn't feel cheap, but I mean, it's plastic, so it's not super heavy duty. Yeah, so I'm going to leave that there, but we're going to begin by answering that first question, which is, what do I like about it? The first thing that I like about it is its price. The item here is priced at about anything between $60 and $70 on Amazon. You can really find different sellers selling it for any price within that range, but for $60 to $70, it does exactly what it says it's supposed to do. I have not had any hangups. Any issues I've had with this have been user error, just kind of getting used to the learning curve, but I haven't had anything go wrong with the machine. It works just like it says it's supposed to work, and I feel like for $60 to $70, having something that is doing exactly what it says it's supposed to do is really a pretty good deal, especially considering that the Addi king size knitting machine is about $200 more than that. And from the reviews that I have watched, and I've watched some reviews, I've done my research, it sounds to me like the Addi knitting machine isn't really doing that much more than the Sentro. However, the price discrepancy is huge. You're paying $200 more for something that is doing essentially the same job. The second thing I love about this, and this is coming from the perspective of a yarn dyer. I am the yarn dyer of Fiber for the People yarn. That is my hand-dyed yarn business. So the second thing I really love about this is the fact that this can make yarn colorway sampling so much easier. As a one-woman operation, it's really difficult for me to swatch all of my colorways as I dye them. I just don't have that kind of time. However, I can crank a hat with one of my yarns in a new colorway or just a colorway I'm featuring in the shop really quickly in less than 30 minutes. And not even that, I don't have to be the one to do it. My husband could do it. It's super easy to learn. I could teach my oldest son to do it. It just is really great for sampling those colorways. And I actually have over here a hat that I cranked on the machine in one of my colorways. So this is just a basic double knit thick hat in the colorway Night Swim by Fiber for the People. I cranked this on my merino alpaca worsted weight yarn base, and you can see very clearly here how that colorway knits up on an item of this size. So this is the way that hats work up, or at least the way that I've been working hats up on this machine. They are double knit, so it's kind of like the Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. It has that real long tube that's closed on both sides, and then you put one side inside of the other, and you have a double thick hat. I actually wore this hat the other day when we went out to play disc golf as a family, and it was super cute. So yeah, definitely loving this. But what I really love about this is it's a really fun way to sample my colorways and not have to knit special swatches for all of my colorways. Plus, I can, they're useful. There's something functional about this, and I think that's really cool. So if you are a yarn dyer and you need a quick and easy way to sample your colorways, and you're not interested in having big garments with your colorways, you just want something to sample it quickly. So I feel like this is a really fun and functional way to showcase your colorways. And my third reason for loving this is that, just like the first reason, is it does exactly what it says it's supposed to do, and that is it knits up or cranks up, whatever you want to call it, really cute thick double knit beanies that can be used to keep you warm. And you can gift them, you can give them to family, you can do them for charity, whatever. The world is your oyster. The beanies are super cute. And if you get the tension right, I think you'll be really happy with the fabric. So before I move on to any other aspect of this video, I do want to share with you some of the things that I've cranked out on the machine. So I just shared this little double knit beanie here, and you can see the tension of the stitches. It looks quite nice. Now this beanie has been blocked. It is the only one out of the ones I'm showing you that has been blocked. I just haven't had enough time to block all of these others. And also I kind of wanted to show you what the hats looked like right off of the machine, so you can get an idea of what they are, what pretty much what they are before you even have to block them. And I think you'll kind of like this because it's really, it's quite nice. It does a pretty good job with even tension. Now, there are a lot of folks who complain, or not complain, but express concerns that the tension is too loose, that the fabric tends to look really open, not nice and consistent. And I can understand that happening if the tension is off. And there is a way to control tension on this machine, and it is right here. It's this little guy. So this little guy, you'll weave your yarn thread through that, and that will help to control your tension as the yarn is threaded through here. And you can choose to thread it through all three of these holes, just one or just two, as you see fit, depending on what you're noticing with your fabric. So I kind of feel like I've mastered the tension and what works best with the two types of yarn that I've used here. And once I figured that out, I noticed that the fabric really looks quite nice, and it creates a really nice looking hat. So the first hat that I knit on this machine is this one here. I used a skein of Lion Brand Heartland Tweed yarn. You can pick it up at Joann's. It's really affordable. I had purchased it for the purpose of knitting hats for the boys. This first one, you can tell that the stitches are somewhat loose here. There's some gapping going on between the stitches, but it's not too bad. But it is a little bit looser than maybe what you would do by hand. However, this hat is super squishy, super soft, and it's also just really cute. It's just a basic double brimmed, super thick hat, perfect for a child, perfect for anybody. My husband popped it on and it looked really awesome on him. Angus put it on, he's my 7-year-old, and it looked really cute on him and he really liked it. So that's kind of a win. The next time I knit a hat with that yarn, I kind of tweaked the tension a little bit, tightened it up just a smidge, and I feel like that really helped with the fabric. So here's the next one. This is the same yarn by Lion Brand. It's just a different color. And you can tell, if I hold the other one up, you might be able to tell. I know it's black. It's kind of hard to see. But the tension is a little bit tighter in this hat over here. And that's because I messed around with the tension and I feel like I got it right where I needed it for this weight of yarn. And this clocks in at a little bit of a heavy worsted weight, in my opinion. It's categorized as a number 4, which is worsted. I just feel like it's a little on the Aran side, maybe a little heavier than your standard worsted, and it looks really, really nice here. Now, again, these are not blocked. So if I blocked this, I'd get a little bit more room, a little bit more length, and I could adjust accordingly, but right off the machine, this is what you get. And it takes less than 30 minutes to get this. And this is an entire ball of that yarn. So if you had this yarn in your stash and you couldn't find yourself knitting it with your hands for anything, but you wanted to be able to use it, put it to good use, this is a really great way to use it up. And there you have a nice cozy hat that looks really cute as well. And it took no time. I don't want to light these on fire. There we go. Okay, this is the next one. Same weight of yarn. This is called Lion Brand Woolies. This is an acrylic wool blend. I almost want to say it might be all acrylic at this point. I know it used to have a little bit of wool in it and I can't really remember. But this is that. It's similar weight and also the tension looks really nice here. I mean, if you didn't know that this was knit on a machine, honestly, I feel like it looks like it could have been hand knit. Once you get that tension down, you really have a nice looking hat with a hand knit consistency to the fabric. So yeah, I love that. So it's really nice. Again, not blocked. If it were blocked, you'd get some more width, you'd get some more length. Okay, now these next two are pretty big. However, when you wear them, they fit almost kind of like big chunky ski hats. So they're super cute on. But the reason why they're a little thicker is because I knit these, or I cranked these, using a bulky weight single ply roving yarn. This yarn that I'm using here is this yarn. Wait, yeah, it's this yarn. You can get this at Joann. It's 100% wool roving, and it's a bulky weight. It's really nice yarn just in general. However, in order to knit the full length of the hat, I needed to use 2 balls of that yarn, and I only had it in single colors. So I decided to do this kind of 2-tone effect. So I used 1 entire ball of yarn for the orange portion of the hat, and then I had to add on this pink yarn for the pink portion of the hat, which is the rest of it. So you could essentially flip this inside out and have a 2-toned hat, or a reversible hat. I don't plan on leaving it like that because I didn't weave the end in up here, but you get the gist. But because I didn't have enough yarn of the single color, I just decided to create the 2-tone, and it made this really cute, super thick beanie. So I love that. Now, the only thing that's happening when you make these hats, well, it's not the only thing, but one of the main differences, I'm not sure what this is. I have a feeling when I added the yarn, these 2 stitches there's just some gapping happening there. There's not a dropped stitch. It's just like a bulky spot. Not exactly sure what that's all about. But when you make these hats, because you're not decreasing for the crown, all you're pretty much doing is cinching in 48 stitches into a really tight cinch. So that's what's happening here. There's no decreasing for the crown. You could, if you wanted to, take the 48 stitches off of the needles on the machine, add it to a circular needle, and then decrease if you wanted to. I just haven't done that. I've been kind of using the knitting machine alone as is, so that way when I do produce hats from the knitting machine, I'm getting them without any hand knitting at all. I felt like that was a really pure way, true way to sample the machine without making any kind of modifications to the piece using my hands. So all of these hats, none of them were used or created using any kind of a knitting needle or decrease method. Everything is just straight off of this knitting machine, and I've been using the little tools that the machine comes with. So this is just like a little tapestry needle that comes with the machine. That's all I've been using, and it's worked out to make all of these hats. So that is what I've made with this so far. And that is one of the things that I love about this, is that you're able to crank out, I mean, look at this. Talk about a cross section of knits. a bunch of thick and cozy and wearable hats that folks will love if you're giving them as gifts, that it's great for charity knitting, or even just for your family if you've got kiddos or husbands or anybody, or even for yourself. I mean, this hat here, I totally knit this with myself in mind, knowing that I wanted just a really cute basic stockinette beanie that was doubled. This personally, honestly, like, I love hand knitting. That's my jam. And I love sitting and knitting. I love the process. But this hat, the idea of knitting in order to get a double thick knit stockinette hat, the idea of knitting a tube this long only to stuff it inside of itself and sew it down and doing that all by hand, that doesn't appeal to me. That process doesn't appeal to me. I mean, there's other things that I would rather knit just plain stockinette than that. There's just something that's not inspiring about that. However, the functionality of the finished piece in that case is what I would like. I like the look of a nice double knit stockinette beanie. I just don't really find any kind of joy in the concept of knitting that. Whereas now, or not like whereas, but now with having the ability to crank it out here and using nice yarn, I get a nice double knit beanie in that stockinette fabric using nice yarn that happens to be yarn that I've dyed. Super functional, super wearable. It took me 30 minutes max, if that, and I'm a happy camper. And I feel like that's really where it's at. So if it's something that you want in your collection of knits, but it's just not something you're interested in knitting by hand because there's so many other things you'd rather be knitting by hand, like, hello, that's an awesome alternative in my opinion. So, okay, that's what I love about it. Look at all of these really cute cozy knit hats. I feel like having them and having them be functional, it means more at this moment than going through the process of knitting each of these hats. I don't know if that makes any sense. I know a lot of people have mentioned in the comments about being a process knitter, and I totally get that. I understand that you don't want anything to get in the way of that amazing process and meditative aspect of knitting. Completely understand. However, those people that feel inspired to use one of these, they're not even on that same playing field. They're not thinking like, oh, the piece I want to make with that, I would rather knit by hand so that I can enjoy the process. It's just not even the same thing. I get the process knitters, but whatever you're creating here, chances are it's not something you really would rather be knitting by hand. It's something that you're doing on this machine for convenience, for speed. Maybe you need a larger volume of something, which I'll touch on that later as well. But the process just really isn't a part of it. This is not replacing hand knitting at all. So I feel like when it comes to whether you're a product or a process knitter, it's very situational. Like in the case of this, there are a lot of hats out there that I want to knit by hand because number one, you can't knit them on the machine. But also too, because I enjoy the process of different techniques and stitches. This is not one of those hats. I don't want to knit a 2-foot long stockinette tube, but I do want the product. And so I'll go ahead and crank it out on here and be happy with the product that I created and move on to knitting something by hand that's much more inspiring. I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent. However, I am saying that if you are a process knitter, this isn't going to change that because this is never going to replace that. This is like a whole different ball game. Okay, I feel like I'm going to start touching on things that I planned on touching on later, so let's go ahead and move on to what it is that I don't like about the machine. And this list is pretty short because like I said in the things I do like about it, it does what it's supposed to do. It's not hurting anybody. So there's not a ton that I don't like about it. However, there's one glaring thing that drives me crazy, and it's the paint job. Like, why does it have to be this weird, like rosy pink color? I don't even know. It's just such a weird pink color. It kind of looks like the water jug or the ice bucket that they give you if you've had a baby in the hospital or you've spent any time in the hospital. Like, you get the stuff, like the plastic stuff they give you, the cups with the water and the ice. This pink color reminds me of the big thing of ice they gave me when I was in the hospital having my boys. Why does it have to be this color? And what is it with this font? Like, get something more industrial looking. Like, if this whole situation were like maybe gray or anything other than this pink and white, I think it would look just a lot more industrial. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't love that. I don't love the way it looks color-wise. And that's a nitpick. Honestly, that doesn't affect how this product works by any means. It's just one of those things. It's like, really? And then when you get the box for this is super I hate to use this word, but girly. It's very pink and very childlike. It looks like it should be something that's for Barbie. It just, I don't know. They really need to change the branding if they want it to be appealing to a wider audience and maybe taken a little bit more seriously. Okay, the other question I asked myself about this was, who is this for? Who would be most inclined to purchase one of these for use? And the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about that and really mulling around who's going to be the most compelled to go out and purchase one of these, it's going to make their life a lot easier and the like. And I thought of charity knitters, people that really like to knit lots of hats for charity, but find that knitting all of those hats for charity is taking away from their own personal kind of time to knit for themselves and that personal creative fulfillment. This is really great for that because you can crank out so many hats that are being given to charity in such little time, and you can teach other members of your family to do it as well. And as a whole family, you can make the hats for charity. It doesn't have to be the only person in the house that happens to know how to hand knit. So I feel like that is a really, really, really great use for this. And that would be the individual who would really get a lot of value out of the knitting machine. Also, folks who would really like to make knit hats, but maybe don't know how to knit and don't really want to learn to knit, or folks who do know how to knit, but for whatever reason, they have dexterity issues at the moment and they just aren't able to pick up the knitting needles, but this might work for them. They can still have knit hats and gift knitted items to family and friends or for themselves, and it's just a lot easier. And then again, like I said, folks who have no intention of learning how to hand knit, but still want to benefit from making knit hats for either themselves or their family or charity or what have you. I also think that this is a really awesome opportunity for kids to learn how to make hats, to get excited about making their own hats, making their own stuff in general. There are other things that you can make with this other than just hats. I have not explored those other things, but they are out there. And there are a lot of folks here on YouTube that are producing videos showing you how to make those things. And I think those are things that kids can get really excited about as well. And it might even get them started thinking about maybe entrepreneurship, what it would be like to knit hats for the purpose of selling them at a market or online. If you wanted to start a little mommy and me or daddy and me Etsy shop, things like that I think are really exciting and cool for kids to use and to see what their hands are capable of. And then lastly, and I did mention this earlier, I feel like the yarn dyer could really benefit from this. Not only does this knit circular items, it also knits what's called panels. They call them panels, flat pieces. There's a little switch on the side here that you can toggle back and forth, whether you want to knit something that is a tube for T or P for panel. And if you wanted to knit a flat piece or just little gauge swatches, but you don't want to knit an entire hat to showcase colorways, you can do that with this. It's just back and forth, and then you have like a little panel that you can use as a swatch, or you could put it together into a patchwork quilt. So that is an option as well. Or like I did here, as a yarn dyer, if you wanted to sample colorways, you can knit up a quick hat, and that's a really great way to showcase your colorways. So my final thoughts after all of that, this is what I think. Now, like I said in the beginning, hand knitting by hand, using needles, all of that we know when we think of knitting, that is my passion, that is my love. This is never going to replace that, and this was never designed to replace that. I look at this as a whole different hobby in the knitting realm or the fiber arts realm. I see value in this for quick gift knitting. I see value in this for cranking out really cute stockinette stitch hats that you just don't have an interest in knitting for yourself. I see this great for charity knitters, for children, for people with dexterity issues, for yarn dyers that want to sample their colors. There is absolutely value in this. And a bonus is I actually enjoyed working with it. I didn't feel like it was a drag. I enjoyed it. I liked watching that fabric tube kind of come together in the middle of the machine. It's fascinating. It's really cool watching the mechanics, and I did totally enjoy it. It is very addictive. I will tell you that. Once you start cranking out hats with this, you start looking at your stash for all of that random yarn that you really don't think you're going to use for anything else, and you just start cranking out hats. It is very addictive. I will give it that. And you can take that for what it is, if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I did enjoy using it. Now, all of that being said, I did find that the best weight of yarn to use in this is worsted to slightly heavy worsted, maybe lighter chunky yarns. I haven't used any kind of fingering weight or anything super bulky. I don't think anything above a light chunky would work in this, to be honest. I think it would just become really cumbersome. You might even end up, the crank might get stuck. It's just not a good idea. So worsted weight to slightly chunkier yarns might work. And that's where I found the best, kind of most smooth operation of this. So the final question that I want to answer here after this brief experience that I've had with this, well, I guess it's not really that brief. I had about 5 days with it, but after this time that I've gotten to spend with the knitting machine, the Sentro knitting machine, is it something that I would spend my hard-earned pennies on to have in my collection of crafty tools? And honestly, based on the things that I've shared with you here and based on its price point, being between $60 and $70, the value that I was able to take out of this, yes, I would absolutely purchase one to have kind of stored away when I needed it for the various different reasons that I mentioned. I would absolutely have one on hand, especially for showcasing my colorways in my shop so that people can see what those different colorways look like knit up and not having to hand knit all of those swatches. I think that that would just be absolutely amazing to be able to do that. And also to have, you know, my husband help me with that, or I could teach my kids how to create a little panel. Yeah, absolutely. I think for those reasons, it's worth having. And also understanding too that when you're purchasing one of these, you're not purchasing this to replace your knitting. You're not purchasing this to kind of override that wonderful meditative process of knitting. You're purchasing this for the reasons that I mentioned here and whatever other reasons you might, you know, discover in your own experience to help you, to make things easier for yourself, and also to get your kids involved, your family involved, and have something fun to add variety to your craft. And for between $60 and $70, I think that's pretty good. Now the Addi, king size Addi, which is essentially the same size as this, it's like $200, almost $300, between $250 and $300. I would absolutely not spend that money. So I don't know what that, if that can provide you any insight as well. I would never spend that kind of money on this machine. Not when you have this one available to you. So I'm sorry, Addi. And those of you that own an Addi and love it, this is not a judgment on you or that machine at all, because I've never tried it. I can't speak to that. But if it's doing even remotely what this is doing, maybe even if it's doing it a little bit better than this, I just wouldn't spend that kind of money. I feel like Sentro is, you know, undercutting or whatever you call that, Addi, because it does what it says it's supposed to do. So you can take that for what it is. I wouldn't spend that kind of money. I would spend this and no more than that. So that's kind of my final piece about the Sentro knitting machine. Is yes, I would purchase this machine for that amount of money. I would not spend any more at this point and based on this limited experience that I've had. Okay, before I go, I'm going to try on or model this hat for you because it has been blocked. The pictures that I shared earlier with me wearing this hat, the hat was not blocked. So I'm just gonna put it on, let you see what a machine knit hat looks like on. Now, of course, this all depends on the person and the head and whatever, but let's go ahead and take a look at what this machine knit hat looks like on my head. Okay, here we are. I got it. Okay. Now, there's like a little piece of yarn coming out of the top right here, and that's just because I need to weave the ends in a little bit better. But there it is. I knit it with a machine, folks. Go ahead and leave your opinions down in the comment section. I welcome them. But yeah, I like it. I mean, this is exactly what it's supposed to be. Like, it's a double knit beanie with worsted weight yarn. It's my own yarn. It's nice yarn. It looks nice. It feels good. I feel like it does the job. Give you a side view. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then I could put a pom-pom on there if I wanted. But for the amount of time it took me to produce this, it's great. I mean, it took me less than 30 minutes to make a hat that would otherwise, knowing how I am about knitting really long tubes, it would take me so long. And I love it. And I don't feel any remorse about not having done this by hand. And if somebody were to say, oh, I love your hat, I'd be like, oh, thanks. I cranked it out on a knitting machine and I would be totally okay with that. There you have it. My opinion on the Sentro knitting machine. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today to listen to me ramble on about my thoughts on that knitting machine back there. It's always fun to kind of embark on new realms of the knitting craft, and whether or not you believe that that is or has a place at the table of the knitting craft, which I do believe it does, it's still a really cool thing to play with and a fun thing to use for all the different reasons that I mentioned here. So I hope you guys have a lovely day. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you took value from this video or enjoyed yourself in the slightest, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe and click the bell icon so you can be notified anytime I upload new things on the channel. If you would like to show further support for the channel, don't forget to check out the merch shop. We have t-shirts, we have really cute coffee mugs painted by yours truly. Lots of fun things over there to strike up fun knitterly conversation. I will see you guys on Sunday for the next episode of the Wool Needles Hands Knitting Podcast. In the meantime, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.